and he is detained pursuant to sovereign domestic authority of El Salvador. Oh, dang. So if this guy wanted to show that he was not a gangbanger, he needs due process to show that he's not a member of this gang. He already had it. He had it in 2019. But if the Supreme Court wants to come in and issue an order that wrecks the presidency for all future generations to come, they can do that. John Roberts, you want to come do that? Go ahead and do it. President Trump now going toe-to-toe with a federal district court judge, already explaining that Kilmar, the person who's the subject of this judicial order, is not coming back to America. He's a terrorist. Trump has plenary authority through the Alien Enemies Act that was passed by Congress to make this decision that is not subject to judicial review from some unelected judge. Said he's not coming back. He's already in El Salvador. Well, Judge Xinis issued this order, if you recall, over the weekend, demanding Trump provide updates. Trump provided a couple updates. We'll see if she's happy with them. I don't think she will be. But remember, this is the judge. Her name is Judge Paula Xinis, and she's from Maryland. She was appointed by Barack Obama. She's a political appointee, no prior judicial experience, was a public defender before she went into private practice, sued the cops, got big fat settlements, took a chunk of the settlement, got rich off of it, and she is in charge of this Kilmar case. This is the Kilmar fella who was not in the country legally at all. There was an order from a lower level district court judge who said that he should not be removed to El Salvador because of the pupusa business that his parents were running, and he was under attack. I don't know why he left his mama's pupusas business or whatever, but he fled to America, did not have asylum because he was already here for too long without applying for asylum, and he was allowed to run free under Joe Biden. Trump came in, utilized the law passed by Congress, and declared him an alien enemy. So they deported this person, and now the judge says, I want answers, saying you can't send him to El Salvador because there was a withholding order from a lower level judge, and you have to bring him back to America, even though he was not in the country legally, right? The only order was that he should not be removed to El Salvador. That was from another judge. But the circumstances underlying that order, by the way, have changed. Nayib Bukele came in, the so-called gangs that were down there that were freaking him out with pupusa attacks are no longer there, okay? So the underlying predicate has been evaporated. But here is what the judge said, just to refresh our recollection, and we'll look at what Trump's responses have been to this. Says, all right, for the reasons discussed during today's status conference, writes the judge, this was last week at the close of the week, said, you know, in advance, this court, Judge Xinis, and I did over the weekend find a clip of her. This was her speaking on March 2021 Women's History keynote address, just for a little flavor, just to spice it up so you can see what she sounds like. Here is the judge.
A newly self-manumitted, brown-skinned woman who could not read or write had the strength and foresight to swear out a warrant for the slave owner's appearance in the Ulster County Court so that she could petition the judge for the return of her son. Sojourner then convinced not one, but two lawyers to help her fight for Peter's freedom. Although the official outcome of the case remains undocumented because the parties settled, Peter returned to New York and was freed ultimately.
Wow, a story that obviously she knows so well. This is such an issue that's so close to her heart, you know, woman of color, getting lawyers and getting healed and all these things. She doesn't even know what the hell the story is. She's reading it from a book or something like that. So that's that judge. Honors mothers, adversity, and sacrifice by women, and she's out there giving the keynote, reading from somebody else's book or something. I don't know what it is. Okay, so that's the judge. Now that's who we're talking about, who just granted this order. She said, I am the president now, okay? So just eat it. Says the court, Judge Xinis, now directs President Trump to file a supplemental declaration from an individual with personal knowledge about this. You better report to me. I want to know. She gave this order. Trump's going to respond. We'll see what he says in response. The current physical location and custodial status of Abrego Garcia Kilmar is his first name. And what steps, if any, defendants have taken Trump to return to facilitate, okay, what have you done to facilitate, we're going to look for this, his immediate return to the United States? And what additional steps Trump will take and when to facilitate his return? In other words, bring his booty back. Now, Trump made no meaningful effort to comply. No, he didn't. And instead, they complained. We saw this last week. They said this order is unreasonable and impractical. They wanted additional time to give them answers and more. The judge said, well, during the hearing, the court posed straightforward questions. She said, I asked you, where is Abrego Garcia right now? What steps have you taken to return this person back to America? And the response from the counsel was, well, Your Honor, I can't answer these questions. And at times said, well, I don't even have that information. I don't know. I can't answer those things. He's in El Salvador. He's in their prison, not mine. So as a result, Trump's DOJ lawyers could not confirm and thus did not advance any evidence at all, right? Last week we're going, oh, dang son, that Trump had done anything to facilitate his return at all. So this remained their position even after this court reminded them that the Supreme Court of the the United States said that this court had the authority to require the government to facilitate Abrego Garcia's return, but also really narrowed that down in the Supreme Court decision, saying with due deference to your co-equal branch of government, and said effectuate. If you remember, there was the other word in there called effectuate, and the judge can't really do that either, right? So you can't really order them to effectuate anything because then you're the president. It was a really bizarre decision from the court, and it's only going to serve to make this much worse, not better, because both sides are declaring victory. The judge came out and says, I'm affirmed, 9-0. Trump's coming out today saying, no, we affirm, 9-0. You can't tell us what to do. Facilitate? Fine, okay, we'll try to facilitate, like we'll send them a letter or something. Is that what you want? But that's all we're doing. From this court's perspective, Trump's contention that they could never answer these basic questions provides no basis for their lack of compliance. So the judge said, look, so it is hereby ordered that beginning on April 12th, which was over the weekend, and continuing every single day thereafter until this judge says otherwise, Trump shall file before 5 p.m. And several of these filings that we're going to look at were late. A declaration made by an individual that answers these three questions: physical location and status of Abrego, what steps you've taken to facilitate his immediate return. And she's not just like using it interchangeably, like, okay, facilitate, effectuate, mandate, whatever. And what additional steps Trump will take and when to facilitate his return. A follow-up hearing will be scheduled for tomorrow, April 15th, and it's going to be epic tomorrow. That these ACLU gangbang lawyers seek additional relief, they can file their motions. We'll look at it. Now, she also says, foreign affairs, she says, this misses the point. You are obliged to comply with court-ordered deadlines. So she just scolded them, right, on the court-ordered deadlines. You must comply with our deadlines. And calling this foreign affairs doesn't justify your lack of compliance. So you can't just say, well, it's foreign affairs, so it's our business, judge, stay out of it. Can't do that. So this was an angry judge. Give me updates immediately. Now, they got an update. Here was what the court sent in. The Trump DOJ sent in via Senior Bureau Official, which is a great title. What kind of official? Senior? Well, what agency? In the Bureau. All right. Well, here you go. Here's the update. And they answered three questions, kind of. They got three paragraphs. Let's see. I, Michael Kozak, under penalty of perjury, say I'm the following. I am Senior Bureau Official of the Bureau of Western Hemisphere Affairs, United States Department of State. Now, as Senior Bureau Official, I'm a member of the Senior Executive Service responsible for, among other things, coordination of our conduct among diplomatic activities in countries of the Western Hemisphere. Now, before that, I was Senior Coordinator for Afghan refugees in the Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration. I've held a bunch of roles since 1971. So the first question is like, who the hell is this dude? Oh, Michael Kozak. Cool. So this dude hops in. He's like, I'll take this one, boys. He says, I'm aware that the instant lawsuit has been filed seeking the return of Kilmar. He uses the actual name instead of just cutting it off at Abrego, right? Sounds worse if you call him Kilmar. That's why they leave it off. And I mean it. That's why they leave it off. It's bad. From the United States to El Salvador. They want him to come to the United States from El Salvador. He is El Salvadorian. He is a citizen of their country, not ours. He had no lawful status here. They want him home. So he says, I provide this declaration based on my personal knowledge, reasonable inquiry, and information obtained from other State Department employees. Wow. All right. So this last paragraph better give us answers to all three of those questions. Let's see. It's my understanding based on official reporting from our embassy in San Salvador. In other words, he's not even talking to El Salvador. He's talking to the embassy there, who's in communication with them, that Abrego Garcia is currently held in the terrorism confinement center in El Salvador. All right. He is alive and secure in that facility. And he is detained pursuant to sovereign domestic authority of El Salvador. Oh, dang. All right. So if we go back to the order, what did the order demand? We had three questions. Physical location. Got that. He's in custody. He's alive. Got that. But number two, have you taken any steps to facilitate his immediate return? No, that's not answered. So that's a no. Not answered on that one. None. Didn't even say we have not taken any steps. Just didn't answer that. What additional steps for question number three will you take and when to facilitate his return? Didn't see anything in there either about that one. So the only thing is he's alive. You're welcome. And he's secure. So stop your crying. He's detained pursuant to El Salvador. So we're not releasing him. He's not coming home. Signed under penalty of perjury by Michael Kozak. Sorry, judge. That's what you get. So that was on the 12th, and the judge is fuming mad. But what's she going to do? Force them to do something about this? Force them to effectuate the return? The Supreme Court just said you can't do that. Mind your business, judge. You can facilitate whatever, but you can't order them to effectuate anything because that might be violating the separation of powers. And the 9-0 whatever Supreme Court, everybody keeps saying that it's not very clear anyways because it was a pure interim opinion gave us no clarity at all. Thank you, John Roberts, for not solving anything. Great. So they sent another update the following day. They said, oh, I guess we got to give you an update every day. So now the 13th comes around. It's Sunday, Palm Sunday. They say, here, Judge, here you go. You want another update? All right, just copy and paste. File, save as. All right, I am Evan C. Katz, says this person, and that person is different than Michael G. Kozak. We got Kozak and Katz. I had to do a double take. So here's another declaration from another person, Evan C. Katz. He says, oh, hey, by the way, now I'm here. I am Assistant Director for the Removal Division with Homeland Security and ICE. Okay, so we got a little bit different person. And this person, quite frankly, feels like a little bit more over the target as somebody who's directly responsible for the decisions. The other guy was senior bureau official. He's like, just there, you know. So I am this person. Now, in this capacity, I'm responsible for leading the division, which is composed of ICE air operations, international operations, removal management. I coordinate 25 ERO field offices to support the removal of aliens from America. I've held this position since December 23, and before this assignment, I was acting director here and deputy assistant here. And I've been with ICE, Legacy INS, since 1997, before they became ICE. Now, I provide this declaration, Judge Xinis, based on my personal knowledge and reasonable inquiry and with access to records, systems, databases, and more. Now, I'm aware that the incident lawsuit has been filed here about the removal of Kilmar. Now, I'm aware that this court's preliminary injunction issued after Judge Xinis issued her order saying, bring him home now, that the government sought a stay pending appeal from the Fourth Circuit on the same day and ultimately on the Supreme Court. Then we came back on March 7th, Chief Justice Roberts issued an administrative stay of that order. Okay, she said, fly him home by midnight or else. John Roberts came out before the clock struck 12, issued the stay. Trump didn't have to bring him back. Then we got the bizarre order. On March 10th, the Supreme Court held that the deadline challenged is no longer effective. So there is no deadline because the deadline had come and passed just by virtue of the calendar, and that aspects of this court's injunction needed to be clarified before they could become effective. Because what does facilitate mean exactly? We don't know. Now, during proceedings in 2019, this gentleman says, an immigration judge upheld Homeland's decision not to grant bond over this person called Kilmar, finding that Homeland's determination that he was a member of MS-13 was trustworthy and supported by other evidence, which we've noted here multiple times. And that is a great post from Will Chamberlain that we've talked about here and reposted once before and communicated many times, right? This was the actual court order that came down that said, he's a native, he came in unknown, he was not admitted and paroled, and he was charged with removability, and he was held in custody. He had the whole hearing, he got an appeal. The dude had plenty of due process. So for all those fake news hacks or other Democrats, he can't challenge his removal. What ended up happening is after he was about to get a fuera out of here, he got some other lawyer, and then they filed an asylee request, and then that's when the order came, which was a withholding order that said he can't be removed to El Salvador because his pupusa business. But the gangs that were attacking mommy's pupusas are no longer in operation there in El Salvador. And by the way, there's good argument that that law and that decision is now, first of all, mooted based on the change in circumstances. But in addition to that, can be terminated based on the operation of the other superior laws that were not being considered at the time, which is the Alien Enemies Act, which just got invoked to target that gang specifically. And that was passed by Congress and it executed by the president, giving him additional powers that allows him to do what he's done. So that was always the proper basis for this, right? And that's what he is saying now. Now, I provided this declaration, says this person, and he tells us, and noted even in the proceedings that they failed to present evidence from Abrego to even rebut that assertion. So if this guy wanted to show that he was not a gangbanger, he needs due process to show that he's not a member of this gang. He already had it. He had it in 2019. He had an opportunity to present evidence. He didn't. He doesn't get 55 takes at this. He got an immigration appeal, by the way, upheld the finding when he appealed it. So he's already been adjudicated. It's done. On March 15th, Abrego Garcia, a native and citizen of El Salvador, was removed to El Salvador because that's where he is, a native and a citizen. Although Abrego had an order of removal issued by an immigration judge, I understand that he should not have been removed because the immigration judge, see that? An order of removal, so he should be removed. Another immigration judge, or the same judge, had also granted him withholding of removal to El Salvador because of pupusas. So he had an order to go. However, I also understand that Abrego Garcia is no longer eligible for withholding of removal. So the judge at the time said you can't go to El Salvador because mommy's pupusas. In spite of the finding of MS-13, it was a whole separate proceeding. Then Garcia, the status has changed. Trump has come in and said, guess what? MS-13, you guys are gangbangers. Now we're not dealing with this like Joe Biden, where you can just go on parades downtown. And because of your membership, you are now a designated foreign terrorist organization. Now, this dude and many others had plenty of time to self-deport or go make other arrangements for themselves. They didn't. Now he's adjudicated a designated foreign terrorist. That gives Trump the powers to remove him with an independent power that overrides this withholding. He is no longer eligible for withholding under the law. So he is now gone. Now, I have reviewed the declaration of the first guy, Michael Kozak, which was filed in this case yesterday. Now, it's my understanding we have no other updates for the court beyond what was provided yesterday. All right. And so let's see. Did they answer really any of those questions at all? So remember, the judge wants an update. Like if you're a teacher and you have to like meet a rubric or something, let's see. Did that update answer any of these questions? The second one didn't answer anything. The current physical location in custody, he says, well, nothing's changed from the first one. So I guess maybe that's there. But nope, we're not taking any steps to facilitate his return. In fact, the update from the Trump administration says, we're right, you're wrong. The withholding is invalidated. It wasn't an administrative error to send him to El Salvador. There was no longer withholding because the president, via the Alien Enemies Act, which is the executive branch, plus the legislative branch, which passed the Alien Enemies Act, gave the power to the president to do this. And an immigration judge who was granting him withholding of removal to El Salvador was doing that predicated on another area of the law that's now superseded, and the law allows for it. So he has been removed and we're not going to bring him back. Now, what steps, if any, are you facilitating his return with? None. What additional steps will you take and when to bring him home to America? His home. He is home. None. No updates from Trump. So when we are back here tomorrow for this hearing, this judge is going to go through the roof and I can't wait to see it. Now, in addition to that, we also saw that the lawyers for the ACLU gangbangers, they filed for additional relief. They're furious. They're saying yesterday, Trump confirmed that the United States has the power to bring Garcia back. He said, if the Supreme Court said bring somebody back, I would do that. I respect the Supreme Court. But that's what the Supreme Court said specifically, they said. And so bring him back. That is not what the Supreme Court said, right? Facilitate the release from custody, but also owe the due deference to the executive branch. And they didn't say bring him back to America. Now, the government should be required to comply with the Supreme Court order, and let's see what they're demanding. They say, what you should do is the following. They say, for the foregoing reasons, we want you to order the government, order Trump by the end of Monday today, she didn't do this, to take specific steps set forth to comply with the injunction, order expedited discovery, right? Give them access to a bunch of stuff, which they're not going to give over anyways, and order the government to show cause by Monday at 10 a.m. why it should not be held in contempt due to its failure to comply with the prior court orders. So like they're not getting any of this stuff, which is just going to be great. So the judge can keep digging if she wants to and making her court look even less and less credible. But as we see here, Kilmar not coming back based on the updates provided to the court. So Democrat senators are losing it. This one came over from Mackenzie Frost, posted this as a Democrat senator called Chris Van Hollen. He said he's going down there. He says, Honorable Embassy, I write to urgently request a meeting with Bukele, the president of El Salvador, during his visit to discuss the illegal detention of my constituent called Kilmar. All these Congress people, senators are fighting for this dude. The Supreme Court ruled unanimously that he was wrongfully deported to prison to El Salvador. Now, on Saturday evening in a court filing to a federal judge in Maryland, Trump confirmed he's being held down there, but they did not detail the steps that have been taken to bring his return. And again, the Supreme Court didn't mandate he come back to America. I have met with Abrego's wife, mother, and brother. As you can imagine, they are extremely worried about his health, safety, and continued illegal confinement, as I am, and they also are wondering when the next fentanyl deliveries will be. I look forward to your response. Sincerely, Chris Van Hollen, U.S. Senator. Amazing. So that happened. Now, here was a little clip of one of the ACLU gangbang lawyers who was there after their gangbang session representing Kilmar. And here's what he sounded like outside the halls of D.C. or wherever this proceeding was. Maryland. This was from last week, just a quick snippet of what he sounds like.
Information about what they're doing. After the Supreme Court issued that order, the district judge issued further order clarifying her ruling and explaining that the government needs to take all steps reasonable to facilitate the return of Mr. Abrego Garcia to the United States, and that in the meanwhile, it needs to provide the court with information, specifically 3 pieces of information. 1, where is Mr. Abrego Garcia right now?
El Salvador.
What is his custodial status?
He's in jail.
2, what has the government done so far to try to bring him back?
Nothing. He's
there were
there.
several days when the court's order was in effect prior to the Supreme Court entering a stay, and now it's been more than 12 hours since the Supreme Court lifted the stay. What has the government done during that time
Nothing.
to bring him back?
Nothing.
And then 3, what is the government planning to do to carry out the court's order, which is, again, to take all reasonable steps to facilitate the return of Mr. Abrego Garcia to the United States as quickly as possible.
Nothing. They're not doing anything. You just read the letters there. That guy was speaking, of course, last week, but he's not coming home as far as we can tell. Now, the president did say if John Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett want to do something useful and actually settle this once and for all, they don't want to. Okay, they know Trump's right here. They know he's lawfully right. The dude was not administratively errored out of this country. The dude was illegal here. He had no asylum status here. He had a removal order except withholding to El Salvador, and Joe Biden let him parade around our country for years. Now he's gone. But if the Supreme Court wants to come in and issue an order that wrecks the presidency for all future generations to come, they can do that. John Roberts, you want to come do that? Go ahead and do it. So instead, what they're doing is they're being coy and sneaky about this. And they're like, well, why don't the judge just go down there and explain what facilitate means? Trump's going to come back out and say, see, I'm right. So the Supreme Court, as usual, is being useless in this entire injunction saga. But here was the president on Air Force One.
How does the administration, how do you plan to respond to the Supreme Court ruling and the other courts about the gentleman who was Maryland, who was the El Salvador president?
Is that the one that was not Trent de Rocco, but he was MS-13?
This is the one that they've said needs to come to.
No, but was he MS-13? Because I only know by that. I don't know which one. But if the Supreme Court said bring somebody back, I would do it. I respect the Supreme Court.
And the lower court judge as well has been asking for
I'm not talking about the lower court. I have great respect for the Supreme Court. So, I'm not totally well versed as to the specific case, but if they said to bring him back, I would tell them to bring him back.
Yeah, but they didn't say that, so he's not coming back. So that's President Trump, and the removal was valid. The Supreme Court knows that too, which is why they're being coy and sneaky about this. But we'll keep our eye on this case. Of course, we're waiting for the hearing in Judge Xinis' courtroom. Thank you for subscribing and joining as we come back to that one.